and welcome to the Haverhill Journal, where we give you a quick look at what's going on in our city. I'm Lindsay Paris, and this week we're continuing our tour of the Mason and Hamlin Piano Factory, where we'll see the finish work on a fine piano, and hearing Haverhill residents' perspectives on families and immigration at the recent showing of the film Ellis. But first, you may remember the Journal episode 1 year ago about the old downtown Haverhill Christmas bell. And it got us thinking the same thing a lot of you have, that it was time to bring back the bell. So HC Media, Whittier Tech, and Bergman and Associates teamed up, taking matters into our own hands by building a brand new 7-foot Christmas bell, styled as beautifully as the original, but made even better by 21st century technology and engineering. Watch as we chronicle the process of building this very time-consuming but spectacular and totally worth it piece of Haverhill holiday history.
Smile after smile, and on every street corner you hear silver bells, silver bells.
I'm standing here in Washington Square under where the Christmas bell once hung. The music from the bell could be heard up and down Merrimack Street, bringing Christmas cheer to the hundreds of shoppers that strolled these sidewalks every day. So here we are, back here exactly 1 year after that first show came out, and I have some very exciting news for you guys. The bell is coming back. Not long after last year's program aired, the folks here at HC Media Bell Central began brainstorming how it was going to happen. Step one was building the bell, and for that, we went to the experts.
You guys came in last year and you asked me about the bell, and it was missing. So over the summer, I got together with a couple different people, found out that it had been worked on at Haverhill Trade School by my former teacher, Mr. Campana. So I went over to Mr. Campana's house and I spent some time with him, and he said that the bell was about 7 foot round by about 7 foot tall. So my students and I got together, and what we tried to do was we tried to come up with a bell that would be 7 foot round by 7 foot tall by looking at a picture of a few different bells. We had the bell pictures that Lindsay sent me from the old original bell, and from there we were able to make a bell out of cardboard. And we did that through using some geometry and also by just kind of figuring out the best way to make it work. So then we decided to build it out of aluminum this time instead of building it out of steel, because it's going to last a lot longer. The first concept we had was just taking this, and you can see 60% of the bell is to here, it's almost straight. And then the last 40% is what really flares out. It flares out and then it flares back in. So once we had that established, then we started to figure out what the sizes were going to be by dividing this way. It's probably going to take us a couple of weeks to get everything all together. There's a lot of rivets, there's a lot of lining things up, there's a lot of concentration measuring and stuff like that, so that it looks like it was made by professionals, which these guys aren't professionals yet, but when they leave here, it'll look like it was done by professionals because of the training they're getting here at Whittier. What's going to happen is I've got to do a lot more turning, a lot more pulling, so I can keep that going straight. So this is our next day working on the project. Now what we're doing is we're rolling the pieces through the rollers, and so we put all 4 pieces together till we can make our transition from the bottom of the bell all the way up to the top part of the bell. This morning my students and I, we started to put the bell together. My students made the welded top piece, which was in 12 sections. They welded that all together. Yesterday some of my students finished grinding that piece. And then this morning we put the top piece to the second piece down, and we got that all screwed together and mounted, and now we just ended up putting the last piece together and lifted it up to see how it's going to hang.
While Mr. Palmer and his students were putting the bell together, we moved on to step 2, planning the huge undertaking of safely hanging a giant aluminum bell in Washington Square. Haverhill engineer Paul Bergman and associate Taylor Moylan joined our team to tackle the job of making sure the bell is structurally safe.
So when Lindsay first came in and told us about this project, and told us about the bell that had been installed, which I'm a Haverhill kid, born and raised, and I could not remember that, but I saw pictures of it, and we spent a little bit of time looking for any drawings or evidence of the old installation, like attachments to buildings and so forth. It's deceptively simple looking that a lightweight aluminum bell would be hanging by some cables in the square, but it's actually a very challenging engineering problem. This new bell has to follow all present-day codes for wind and ice and everything else. So any old drawings or attachments to buildings would have been good for reference or knowledge, but we really had to start as if it was a brand new project.
This is one of the first projects that I've been on. It's pretty interesting, it's pretty unique. You don't design bells every day. The whole thing's been pretty challenging. Maybe just designing the cables and the boxes to go on the roofs. It's a little more involved than we initially thought, I think.
Simple looking to the observer, but from an engineering standpoint, it's pretty challenging. There's going to be wind on the bell and ice and these cables that go up to 3 different buildings. So we have to look at all of the attachments and just design it to be safe and to last for a long time.
On November 18th, 2015, that beautiful aluminum bell was delivered to the HC Media House of Prep and Paint, and madness ensued. And our good friend Jenny Arndt from Creative Haverhill was on hand to give it the finishing touches. There's still more painting and finish work to be done, but I'm not showing you guys before the parade, so come and see it on Sunday.
Be at the Santa Parade Sunday, November 22nd, kicking off at 1 p.m. to catch the first public showing of the bell atop HC Media's float. The bell will be hung in its historic Washington Square location in December. Stay tuned because we're working on it every day and we'll be bringing you regular updates. This week, we continue our Made in Haverhill series focusing on local manufacturing with the second installment of our tour of Mason and Hamlin Piano Company. In part 1, we saw the skilled craftsmanship that building the base skeleton of a piano entails. This time, we'll watch as that wooden skeleton acquires its musical voice and receives the fine finishing touches that make a Mason and Hamlin piano worthy of the finest concert halls in the world.
So you saw one close to, a plate ready for stringing. This is now what a strung grand piano looks like. So you see all the wires in place, the tuning pins are in place, the felt is in place, all of the things are done. These are strings, and I'm doing it in a way that I don't touch it with my skin because you'll make rust spots. These are the tuning pins. These are the hitch pins. Right? This is what's called an aliquot. It tunes the back side of it in an interval in relation to the front side.
And the inside, the grain on the inside is so beautiful.
Yes, now this is what's called the Cambridge series, and this is what's called a Macassar ebony. It'll also be on the bottom of the lid, and it will be on the faux board. Sometimes you make this on the entire piano, but this is what's popular now for a case. Now we're going to put an action into the piano. An action is the assembly of keys and various parts, so when you press a key, the piano makes a sound. The first step of putting in a keyboard and action in is to fit the keyboard itself. The keyboard comes just like you see it on a panel, and so we have to fit the keyframe to the key bed so that it's a one-to-one fit. Now, once we do that, we'll position it and do all of those things, and then we'll move on and set a top action on top of it at all of the correct elevations and what have you. Once a keyboard is set into the piano, we now need to set an action on top of the keyboard. So here what we're doing is we're putting an action on. We've built up the cleats, and what's important is the height of the centers and the location front to back on the keyboard, which has all been done now. Here what we're doing is we're gluing hammers onto hammer shanks. The hammer is what actually strikes the string. The shank is what transmits the energy to the hammer. We're gluing the hammers onto the shanks and in the right position so everything lines up nicely with the strings. Regulating is adjusting the action so that it all functions correctly. You could view it as like timing in an automobile. So here, for instance, this is the let-off regulation, and what it means is that the hammer action quits driving the hammer 1/16 of an inch away from the string. And so this screw is turned to control that. So when the action goes back in the piano, it will function correctly, but out here we can reach everything to work on it. Once the action regulation is completed, now we need to voice the instrument. At this point it plays well, but it doesn't sound very good because the hardness of the hammer isn't quite right. If the hammer is too hard, it's a harsh, unpleasant sound. If it's too soft, it's not very powerful and not very well defined, and so the voicer, or the tone regulator, basically works with the hammers until a musical sound is achieved throughout the instrument. What you see here is he's needling a hammer.
What you're doing with the needle is you're stabbing the fibers, so you're manipulating the tone. You know, there's the pitch aspect of it where you're getting everything to proper pitch. And then you want to get the color right. You want to get a nice balance, nice rich bass, and then balance it out into the treble.
The entire 5th floor, both sides, is finished department. And so let's just walk through this floor here. You can see now they've just been sanding a lid. Here's rubbing a lid. This is going to be a satin. She's rubbing it with steel wool. So this is a walnut finish. Anything we put finish on, we put up here. You see what we would call leg tops. They're going to get finished and then they will be glued together with the bottom part of the leg later on. So here, for instance, you can see one that they've done some of the buffing. They sand it till it's flat and then they buff to get the polish. That's the satin finish. So let's go over and look at the spray rooms now. Kind of the point here is you build up finish until none of the wood grain shows. And so a 0 grain finish is kind of an expensive finish, but it's been the standard in the piano industry for 100 years, or actually more like 200 years. You can smell the finish. It's basically the smell of polyester, but these have all been sprayed. Once all of the case parts are on, we actually take it back apart and we buff, or we do what we call final polish, where now we make it look like a brand new piano. Inevitably, as you go through the process, the little scuffs and scrapes happen. So what we're doing here now is taking all of that out and we're buffing and polishing it so that it looks like a completely new instrument, which would be satisfactory to a new customer. Try out a concert grand. This is a 9-foot floor.
Look at this. Oh my gosh.
Listen to this.
Wow.
That's what a concert grand does.
Right, I can see, because you don't get that from the regular upright.
No, you don't.
Now, who buys most of your pianos, or where do you sell most of your pianos?
Basically, we sell Mason and Hamlins to professional pianists. Like any good instrument, it has its own voice, it has its own tonality, and so a real musician won't just buy a brand name. They'll play pianos till they find one that speaks to them, and those are the people who buy Mason and Hamlins. And we can get them in a variety of finishes. The fancier finishes cost more than the simple black, but probably 90% of what we make is black, right? We make either a satin black like this or a polished black like that, but 90% of what we make is black. We've been entrusted with the responsibility of bringing back one of the world's finest instruments. As such, we feel a great obligation to the musical community and those who have loved Mason and Hamlin's. Haverhill has been really quite good to Mason and Hamlin over the last 25 years, and we intend to be part of Haverhill for many years to come.
Just sitting at one of those grand pianos will make you feel like you're at Symphony Hall. Mason and Hamlin welcomes individuals and groups for factory tours. For more information, call 978-374-8888 or visit masonhamlin.com. The Inside Out project that graced Haverhill last summer attracted the attention of J.R., the French artist, Inside Out creator, and global celebrity, who chose Haverhill for the site of a special showing of the film Ellis. Starring Robert De Niro, the film explores what remains of Ellis Island while presenting stories of those who passed through. The film showing brought out many of Haverhill's familiar faces who told us about how they've been impacted by the immigration experience.
The Ellis film came to Haverhill due to the connection with the Inside Out project. Both projects, Ellis and the Inside Out, were started by the same artist, J.R., and he reached out to his project leaders, such as Leota and I, and asked if we wanted to host a screening of Ellis. He hooked up with De Niro and Tribeca Films to put this short film together. It's shot in the hospital at Ellis Island, which is an abandoned building, and JR actually did an installation similar to the Inside Out, black and white photos, that was called Unframed, and it's basically to get you thinking about immigration.
I'm really pleased that this film came to Haverhill, and I'm glad that the topic was about immigration. Haverhill was and still is a community of immigrants that settled here and actually made the city wonderful and great and world-renowned for the shoes, the slipper city throughout the world. To me, it's significant because those people came here, just as in the movie it says, looking for new opportunities, to be great people, to be able to get ahead. What you may not know, and I'll let you in on the film, is that when Robert De Niro's walking across the floor, you see all these faces. Well, those are contemporary faces. Those are the faces of people who did not make it to the United States, that came on a boat and drowned, or were denied access for being refugees that were not allowed to cross a certain border.
There were all these millions of people who come through here, and I see them all. People of every color, shape, and size. And I think about all those people who did. All of those that made it.
I've been to Ellis Island, and I don't remember whether or not the old hospital was accessible to the public, but I did get to see sections that had been restored, and so it brought back memories, and to see it sort of in that dilapidated state really brought back what the immigrants must have been going through when they came through there.
I am very concerned that people today forget their roots, forget, what built this city. And what built this city was people from all over the world, immigrants from all over the world. And as I mentioned in my presentation, I worked with a number of people when I worked for the shoe factory for one summer. I worked with people from literally every country, and it was just an opportunity to learn what drove them. And what drove them was a desire for a better life for their kids.
Well, watching the film, the first thing that I thought about was my grandparents, because without them I wouldn't be here, and how they came for opportunity and for the American dream. And I feel that, so often nowadays the American dream is tested, and that people say the American dream is a lie, the American dream is dead. I feel that it's very much alive, and that I'm a living testimony to that.
It evoked some of the struggles that they must have had, the uncertainty of standing in line, the difficult conditions. It was a very haunting piece.
I'm kind of focused on the memory, the dreams, and celebrating those people who came through Ellis Island or come to the United States or even other places, I suppose. But it's that dream, and then that also makes you value all we have here.
I'm the ghost of all those who never got to get there. And the ghost of those who will never get there.
Thanks to Linda and Leota for bringing this really fascinating film to town. For more information and other screening locations, visit ellis-themovie.com. Thanksgiving is less than a week away, which means it's Feaster 5 time in the Merrimack Valley. The massive annual road race, sponsored by the Merrimack Valley Striders, has some special guests this year. Red Sox catcher Ryan Hannigan is the Feaster 5's Grand Marshal. Running legends Joan Benoit Samuelson, Bill Rogers, and Team Hoyt will be appearing. And most importantly, HC Media's own Colin Kennedy is part of the human chain at race start. And at the end, every finisher goes home with a pie. Visit feaster5.com to register for the race or volunteer along the route. If you have a story or event you'd like to see featured on the Haverhill Journal, call us at 978-372-8070 or email info@mediahc.org. And don't forget to like us on Facebook or at our YouTube channel, HCTV Haverhill. And that's what's happening in Haverhill the week of November 19th. I'm Lindsay Paris. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you next time.